Maria Santos pushed her cart down the long hallway of Building 47 at Lockheed Martin's classified facility in Fort Worth, Texas. The wheels squeaked softly against the polished floor as she made her way to the engineering department. It was 6:30 a.m., and the building was still mostly empty, except for the security guards and a few early arrivals. She had been working as a coffee assistant for 3 years now. Every morning, she prepared fresh coffee, restocked the break rooms, and made sure the engineers had everything they needed to start their day. Most people barely noticed her. She was just the coffee lady who smiled and nodded when they mumbled their thanks. But Maria had a secret that none of her colleagues knew about. Before coming to America, she had been an aerospace engineer in Mexico City. She held a master's degree in mechanical engineering from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. She had worked on satellite systems and aircraft maintenance for 5 years before her husband got a job offer in Texas. When they moved to the United States, her qualifications weren't recognized. The process of getting her credentials validated would take years and cost thousands of dollars they didn't have. Her husband's salary as a software developer was good, but not enough to support both the validation process and their daily expenses. So Maria took the first job she could find at Lockheed Martin, hoping to work her way up eventually. She spoke perfect English, but her accent made some people assume she wasn't educated. When she tried to contribute ideas during her breaks, supervisors would smile politely and change the subject. After a few months, she stopped trying and focused on doing her job well. The F-35 Lightning II program was Lockheed Martin's crown jewel. The fifth-generation fighter jet was being developed for the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marines, plus allied nations around the world. Each aircraft cost around $80 million, but the entire program was worth over $400 billion, making it the most expensive military weapons system in history. Building 47 housed the avionics department, where teams of engineers worked on the jet's sophisticated electronic systems. The F-35 was packed with cutting-edge technology, stealth capabilities, advanced sensors, and computer systems that could process massive amounts of data in real time. Maria had memorized the layout of every floor in Building 47. She knew which teams worked where, what projects they were handling, and even some of their technical challenges. During her rounds, she couldn't help but listen to conversations about circuit designs, software bugs, and system integration problems. The engineers often worked late into the night, surviving on coffee and energy drinks. Maria made sure they always had fresh supplies. She learned their preferences. Dr. Williams liked his coffee black with 2 sugars. Jennifer Chen preferred green tea in the afternoons. And the systems integration team needed extra strong brew during their debugging sessions. One person who always treated Maria kindly was Sarah Mitchell, a senior systems engineer in her early 30s. Sarah had joined Lockheed Martin straight from MIT and had quickly risen through the ranks. Unlike others, she actually talked to Maria like a person, not just a service provider. "Good morning, Maria," Sarah said as she arrived at her desk that Tuesday morning. "How's your daughter doing in school?" "She's doing well, thank you for asking," Maria replied, pouring Sarah's usual coffee. "She wants to be an engineer like the people here." Sarah smiled. "That's wonderful. She's lucky to have such a hard-working mom as a role model." Maria felt a pang in her chest. If only Sarah knew that she had once designed systems just as complex as the ones her daughter dreamed of working on someday. The F-35 program had been facing increasing pressure from Congress and the Pentagon. Costs were spiraling, and there were ongoing issues with the aircraft's software and sensors. The latest problem involved the Distributed Aperture System, or DAS, which gave pilots a 360-degree view around their aircraft using multiple cameras. The DAS was revolutionary technology, but it was also incredibly complex. 6 infrared cameras mounted around the aircraft fed data to the pilot's helmet display, creating a seamless view even through the aircraft's floor. But the system had been experiencing glitches during test flights, causing brief blackouts that could be deadly in combat. Maria overheard heated discussions about the DAS problems during her morning rounds. The engineering teams were under tremendous pressure to find a solution. Program managers were talking about potential delays that could cost millions of dollars and damage relationships with international partners. "We've run every diagnostic test possible," she heard Dr. Williams telling his team. "The hardware checks out fine. The software looks clean, but we're still getting these random failures during high-stress maneuvers." "Maybe it's an integration issue," suggested one of the younger engineers. "Something about how the system interacts with other avionics." Dr. Williams shook his head. "We've checked all the interfaces. Everything looks perfect on paper." Maria continued her rounds, but the conversation stuck in her mind. She had dealt with similar integration problems in Mexico when working on satellite communication systems. Sometimes the issue wasn't with individual components, but with how they interacted under specific conditions. Later that morning, she was cleaning the break room when she overheard Jennifer Chen talking to a colleague about power fluctuations in the electrical system. "The power supply is rock solid," Jennifer was saying. "But during certain flight profiles, we see these tiny voltage drops that shouldn't matter. They're well within tolerance for all our components." "Could those drops be affecting the DAS?" asked her colleague. "Theoretically, no. The DAS has its own power conditioning, and those voltage drops are microscopic, but—" Jennifer paused, looking frustrated. Maria wanted so badly to speak up. In Mexico, she had encountered a similar problem where tiny power fluctuations, insignificant individually, created cumulative effects in sensitive sensor arrays. But she knew that if she said anything, they would probably think she was overstepping her boundaries. She finished cleaning and moved on to the next area, but her mind was racing. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that the power fluctuations and DAS failures were connected. That afternoon, during her lunch break, Maria went to the technical library in Building 47. Employees had access to unclassified technical documents, and she wanted to research power conditioning systems. She found several papers on electromagnetic interference and power quality in avionics systems. As she read, her suspicions grew stronger. The F-35's electrical system was incredibly sophisticated, but it was also pushing the boundaries of what was possible in a fighter-sized aircraft. The combination of stealth requirements, advanced sensors, and powerful computers created unique challenges. She discovered that the DAS cameras were particularly sensitive to power quality because they operated in the infrared spectrum. Even tiny fluctuations could cause the sensors to briefly lose calibration, resulting in the blackouts pilots were experiencing. But Maria also knew she couldn't just walk up to the engineering team and present her theory. She was the coffee assistant, and they were PhD engineers from prestigious universities. They would never take her seriously, no matter how good her analysis was. Over the next few days, she continued to listen and learn. The pressure on the engineering teams was increasing. There were rumors that the Pentagon might cancel orders if the DAS problems weren't resolved soon. Jobs were at stake, and everyone was working overtime trying to find a solution. Maria noticed that Sarah Mitchell was staying later than usual, looking increasingly stressed. One evening, as Maria was doing her final rounds, she found Sarah still at her desk at 9 p.m., surrounded by circuit diagrams and test results. "You should go home," Maria said gently, refilling Sarah's coffee cup. "You look exhausted." Sarah looked up with tired eyes. "I can't. We're missing something obvious, and I can't figure out what it is. The DAS system should be working perfectly, but these failures keep happening." Maria hesitated for a moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "May I ask what kind of failures?" she said quietly. Sarah was surprised by the question, but was too tired to be dismissive. "Brief blackouts during high-G maneuvers. The cameras lose sync for a few seconds, then come back online. It's like they're resetting themselves." "And this happens only during stress conditions?" "Yeah, when the aircraft is pulling hard maneuvers." The weird thing is, all our power systems check out fine. The DAS has dedicated power conditioning, and the voltage drops we see are tiny. Maria took a deep breath. In my previous work, I saw similar problems with sensitive infrared sensors. Sometimes very small power fluctuations can cause cumulative effects, especially when multiple systems are drawing power simultaneously. Sarah looked up sharply. Previous work? What kind of work? Maria felt her heart racing. She had revealed more than she intended. I used to work with electronic systems before I came here. What kind of electronic systems? Satellite communication arrays in Mexico. Sarah's exhaustion was replaced by curiosity. You worked on satellites? Maria nodded reluctantly. I was an aerospace engineer, but my credentials aren't valid here. So, she gestured around the room. Sarah stared at her for a long moment. You're an engineer? Was an engineer. Now I make coffee. Maria, what you just described about cumulative power effects, that's exactly the kind of thing we've been missing. Can you explain more? For the first time in 3 years, Maria felt like someone was actually listening to her technical knowledge. She sat down across from Sarah and began to explain her theory about how the tiny voltage drops, when they occurred during high-power draw situations, could create a resonance effect in the DAS power conditioning circuits. The individual voltage drops are within tolerance, Maria explained, but when they happen rapidly during high-G maneuvers, they create a pattern. The power conditioning circuits try to compensate, but the compensation itself creates tiny delays in the power delivery. These delays accumulate until the DAS cameras briefly lose sync. Sarah was writing notes furiously. This would explain why we can't reproduce the problem in static testing. We need the dynamic power draws that only happen during actual flight maneuvers. Exactly. And the solution might be adjusting the power conditioning algorithms to anticipate these patterns instead of just reacting to them. They talked for another hour, with Maria explaining the mathematical principles behind power resonance effects and Sarah translating them into the specific context of the F-35's systems. Finally, Sarah leaned back in her chair. Maria, I have to ask, why haven't you told anyone about your background? Maria's expression grew sad. Who would listen? I'm the coffee lady. Even if I tried to explain, people would think I'm pretending to be something I'm not. But you could have applied for engineering positions. With what credentials? The process to validate my degree would take years and cost more money than my family has. So I take care of my daughter and make coffee for real engineers. Sarah felt a mix of anger and admiration. Here was a qualified engineer who had been invisible for 3 years, watching their struggles while serving them coffee. The system had failed Maria, but Maria had never stopped being an engineer in her heart. Would you be willing to present this theory to the team? Sarah asked. Maria looked frightened. They won't listen to me. They will if I introduce you properly. And if your theory is correct, you might just save the F-35 program. That night, Maria went home to her small apartment where her 12-year-old daughter Elena was doing homework at the kitchen table. How was work, Mom? Elena asked without looking up from her math problems. Different, Maria said. Very different. She helped Elena with her homework, as she did every night. Elena was brilliant at mathematics and science, just like her mother. Maria dreamed that someday her daughter wouldn't have to serve coffee to engineers. She would be the engineer. But now, for the first time in years, Maria dared to hope that maybe things could change. Maybe tomorrow would be the day she stopped being invisible. The next morning, she arrived at Building 47 with a mixture of excitement and terror. Sarah had promised to set up a meeting with the DAS team, but Maria wasn't sure she was ready to step out of the shadows. As she prepared her cart for the morning rounds, she thought about all the conversations she had overheard, all the problems she had understood but never voiced, all the solutions she had kept to herself. For 3 years, she had been the coffee assistant who nobody really saw. But today, that was about to change. The F-35 program was worth $400 billion and represented the future of military aviation for the United States and its allies. Hundreds of the world's most brilliant engineers had been working to solve the DAS problem. But sometimes the most important insights come from the most unexpected places. Maria Santos was about to prove that wisdom and expertise can't be hidden forever, and that the person serving your coffee might just be the one who saves your multi-billion-dollar project. As she pushed her cart toward the engineering section, she whispered a small prayer and prepared to step into the light. Sarah Mitchell arrived at Building 47 an hour earlier than usual that Wednesday morning. She had spent most of the night reviewing Maria's theory about the power resonance effects in the DAS system. The more she thought about it, the more sense it made. She found Dr. Williams in his office, already deep in conversation with the program director, Colonel James Hartford. The tension in the room was thick. "The Pentagon is losing patience," Colonel Hartford was saying. "We have 3 international partners threatening to reduce their orders if we can't fix this DAS issue. We're talking about potentially billions in lost contracts." "I understand the pressure, Colonel," Dr. Williams replied. "But we've tested everything. The hardware is perfect, the software is clean, and all our power systems meet specifications." Sarah knocked on the open door. "Excuse me, but I think I might have found something." Both men looked up hopefully. Colonel Hartford, a career military officer who had transitioned to defense contracting, was known for his direct approach and no-nonsense attitude. "What have you got, Mitchell?" he asked. "It's about cumulative power effects during dynamic load conditions. I believe the DAS failures are caused by resonance patterns in the power conditioning circuits during high-G maneuvers." Dr. Williams frowned. "We've analyzed the power systems extensively. The voltage fluctuations are minimal." "That's exactly the point," Sarah said. "Individually, they're insignificant. But when they occur in rapid sequence during flight stress, they create a cumulative effect that briefly disrupts the DAS camera synchronization." Colonel Hartford leaned forward. "Can you prove this theory?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I'd like to bring in a consultant who identified this pattern, someone with experience in similar power resonance issues." "A consultant? From where?" Dr. Williams asked. "Actually, she's already here at the facility. She's been observing our challenges and has insights that might be crucial." An hour later, Maria Santos stood outside Conference Room 7, her hands trembling slightly. Through the glass door, she could see the DAS engineering team assembled around a large table. Dr. Williams, Jennifer Chen, and 8 other engineers were waiting, along with Colonel Hartford and 2 other program managers. Sarah appeared beside her. "Ready?" Maria smoothed her simple blue dress, the same type she wore every day for her coffee rounds. "I don't look like an engineer." "Engineers come in all forms," Sarah said firmly. "Your ideas are what matter." They entered the room, and conversation stopped. Several engineers looked confused, recognizing Maria as the coffee assistant, but not understanding why she was at their technical meeting. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Maria Santos," Sarah began. "She's identified what I believe is the root cause of our DAS failures." Dr. Williams cleared his throat. "Sarah, isn't Ms. Santos from the facility staff?" "Maria is an aerospace engineer with a master's degree from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. She has 5 years of experience with satellite communication systems and has been analyzing our DAS problems." The room fell silent. A few engineers exchanged glances. Colonel Hartford spoke first. "Mrs. Santos, what's your assessment of the situation?" Maria's voice was quiet but steady. "The DAS camera failures occur because of cumulative power conditioning delays during high-stress flight maneuvers. The individual voltage drops are within tolerance, but they create a resonance pattern that temporarily disrupts camera synchronization." Dr. Williams looked skeptical. We've modeled the power systems extensively. The conditioning circuits handle those voltage variations easily. Yes, individually, Maria said, gaining confidence. But during a high G-turn, multiple systems draw power simultaneously. The flight control computers increase their processing load, the sensors work harder to maintain accuracy, and the pilot's helmet display updates more frequently. Each system creates tiny power demands that the conditioning circuits compensate for. She walked to the whiteboard and began drawing a diagram. When these compensations happen rapidly, every few milliseconds during a hard maneuver, they create a pattern. The power conditioning circuits are designed to react to individual events, not to anticipate patterns. Jennifer Chen leaned forward. You're suggesting the circuits are always one step behind the actual power demands? Exactly. And the DAS cameras are the most sensitive to these tiny delays because they require precise synchronization to create the seamless 360-degree view. When the power delivery is even microseconds off schedule, the cameras briefly lose sync. Maria drew a series of wave patterns on the board. In satellite communications, we call this lag accumulation. Each small delay adds to the previous one until the system reaches a threshold where it must reset to regain synchronization. One of the younger engineers, David Kim, studied the diagram. If you're right, this would explain why we can't reproduce the problem in static testing. We need the dynamic power loads that only occur during actual flight. Correct, Maria said. The test bench can simulate individual power fluctuations, but it cannot replicate the complex, rapid sequences that happen during combat maneuvers. Colonel Hartford was taking notes. What's your proposed solution? Maria turned back to the whiteboard. Instead of reactive power conditioning, we need predictive conditioning. The system should anticipate power demand patterns based on flight data and pre-adjust the power delivery. Dr. Williams shook his head. That would require completely rewriting the power management software. The cost would be enormous, and the timeline— Not completely rewriting, Maria interrupted respectfully. We can add a predictive algorithm layer that works with the existing system. The conditioning circuits would still handle individual fluctuations, but the new layer would smooth out the patterns before they accumulate. She drew another diagram, showing how the modified system would work. The flight computers already track G-forces, airspeed, and maneuvering data. We can use this information to predict when high-power demand sequences will occur and precondition the power delivery. Sarah was writing furiously. This could work. We wouldn't need to replace hardware, just modify the software algorithms. How long would this take to implement? Colonel Hartford asked. Maria looked at the assembled engineers. The predictive algorithms are straightforward. Maybe 2 weeks to write and test. Integration with existing systems would take longer, perhaps 6 weeks for full implementation. Jennifer Chen was studying Maria's diagrams. These power resonance calculations— Where did you learn this approach? Satellite communication arrays face similar challenges, Maria explained. When multiple satellites in a network experience power fluctuations simultaneously, the communication delays can accumulate and cause signal loss. We developed predictive power management to prevent this. Dr. Williams finally looked convinced. Can you show us the mathematical model? For the next hour, Maria filled 3 whiteboards with equations and diagrams. She explained the mathematical principles behind power resonance, showed how to calculate accumulation thresholds, and outlined the predictive algorithms needed to prevent synchronization loss. The engineering team asked detailed questions, and Maria answered each one with precision and clarity. It became obvious that she wasn't just theorizing, she had deep, practical experience with these exact problems. This is brilliant, David Kim finally said. I've never seen this approach to power conditioning before. Colonel Hartford looked impressed. Miss Santos, where have you been for the past 3 years? Maria's expression grew sad. making coffee and cleaning break rooms while trying to figure out how to validate my engineering credentials in this country. The room felt uncomfortable. Here was a qualified engineer who had been serving them coffee while they struggled with problems she could have helped solve years ago. Dr. Williams cleared his throat. Maria, would you be willing to work with the team on implementing this solution? I don't have an engineering position here. Colonel Hartford stood up. That can be arranged. We have contractors and temporary positions for specialized expertise. Sarah smiled. I'll handle the paperwork. Maria, you're officially a consulting engineer as of today. Over the next 2 weeks, Maria worked closely with the DAS team to develop the predictive power conditioning algorithms. She collaborated with Jennifer Chen on the software architecture, helped David Kim with the mathematical models, and worked with Sarah on integration testing. The transformation was remarkable. Maria went from being invisible to being the center of crucial technical discussions. Her insights were valuable not just for the DAS problem, but for other systems that faced similar power management challenges. But the work wasn't easy. The F-35's electrical system was incredibly complex, with dozens of interconnected subsystems. Every change had to be carefully tested to ensure it didn't create new problems elsewhere. We need to be absolutely certain, Dr. Williams told the team during one of their daily meetings. If this modification causes any other system to fail, we could be worse off than before. Maria was working 12-hour days, splitting her time between algorithm development and extensive testing. Her daughter Elena barely saw her, but Maria had explained that she was working on something very important. Are you really helping to build fighter jets? Elena asked one evening as Maria reviewed code at the kitchen table. I'm helping to fix a problem with the jets, Maria said. It's the kind of work I used to do in Mexico. Does this mean you're an engineer again? Maria paused. I was always an engineer, mija. I just wasn't able to do engineering work. But now, maybe things are changing. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. The team had finished implementing the predictive power conditioning algorithms and were ready for the first test flight. They would use a modified F-35A from the test squadron at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Colonel Hartford arranged for the core team to fly to Edwards to observe the test. For Maria, it would be the first time she had ever seen the aircraft she had been helping to improve. The F-35A sat in the hangar like a sleeping predator. Its angular, stealth-designed hull looked almost alien compared to earlier generation fighters. Maria stared at it in wonder. Impressive, isn't it? Said Test Pilot Major Lisa Rodriguez, who would be flying the aircraft. This bird has more computing power than the entire Apollo program. Major Rodriguez had been briefed on the DAS modifications and understood the critical nature of the test. So, the theory is that your new power management system will prevent the camera blackouts during high-G maneuvers. That's correct, Dr. Williams replied. We'll be monitoring all systems during the test flight, with particular attention to DAS performance during stress conditions. Maria felt nervous as she watched the pre-flight preparations. 3 years of serving coffee had led to this moment, her first real contribution as an engineer since arriving in America. The test flight plan called for progressively more aggressive maneuvers, starting with gentle turns and building up to high-G combat simulations. If the DAS system could maintain synchronization throughout the entire flight profile, they would know the solution was working. Major Rodriguez climbed into the cockpit and began her pre-flight checks. The DAS cameras came online, providing the characteristic 360-degree view that made the F-35 so revolutionary. On the ground, the engineering team monitored dozens of data streams in real time. All systems nominal, Jennifer Chen reported from the control room. DAS is operating normally. The F-35A rolled down the runway and lifted gracefully into the clear desert sky. Major Rodriguez began with basic flight maneuvers, testing the aircraft's response and checking all systems. Beginning moderate G-loading, Major Rodriguez reported over the radio. 4 Gs, 5 Gs. DAS is stable. Maria watched the power consumption data on her monitor. The predictive algorithms were working exactly as designed, anticipating power demand spikes and smoothing out the delivery before accumulation could occur. Increasing to combat maneuvers, Major Rodriguez announced. 7 Gs, 8 Gs. This was the critical test. At these G-forces, with all systems under maximum stress, the old power conditioning system would have started showing the accumulation effects that caused DAS failures. DAS holding steady, Jennifer reported excitedly. No sync issues, no blackouts. The flight continued for another hour, with Major Rodriguez pushing the aircraft through increasingly demanding maneuvers. The DAS system performed flawlessly throughout every test scenario. When Major Rodriguez finally landed and shut down the engines, the control room erupted in cheers. The modification had worked perfectly. Colonel Hartford shook Maria's hand. Outstanding work, Ms. Santos. You've potentially saved this program hundreds of millions of dollars. But for Maria, the success meant something much more personal. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again. Not the coffee assistant, but Maria Santos, aerospace engineer. That evening, as the team celebrated at a restaurant near the base, Dr. Williams approached Maria with a serious expression. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I've been thinking about how many times you must have overheard us discussing problems you could have helped solve. We failed to see what was right in front of us." Maria nodded graciously. "People see what they expect to see. I was the coffee lady, so that's all I could be." "Well, that changes now. When we get back to Fort Worth, I'm recommending you for a permanent engineering position. Your work on this project has been exceptional." As Maria looked around the table at her new colleagues, people who now saw her as an equal rather than someone who served them coffee, she thought about her daughter's dreams of becoming an engineer. Elena would never have to hide her abilities or serve coffee while her talents went unrecognized. The world was changing, and Maria had played a small part in changing it. But the real test was still ahead. The F-35 program would need to undergo extensive additional testing, and there would be new challenges to overcome. Maria Santos was ready for whatever came next. She was an engineer again, and she had work to do. 6 months after the successful test flight at Edwards Air Force Base, Maria Santos stood in the Pentagon briefing room wearing a navy blue business suit instead of her old coffee cart uniform. The room was filled with high-ranking military officials, defense contractors, and international representatives from allied nations participating in the F-35 program. General Patricia Hayes, the Air Force's program executive officer for the F-35, was addressing the group. "Thanks to innovative engineering solutions, we have resolved the DAS synchronization issues that were threatening program timelines. The fix has been implemented across all variants of the F-35, and we're seeing perfect performance in operational testing." Maria sat quietly in the back row, still getting used to being in rooms like this. Her official title was now Senior Systems Engineer, Power Management Division, but she sometimes felt like she was living someone else's life. The briefing covered the broader impact of the DAS fix. International partners, including the United Kingdom, Italy, and Australia, had confirmed their full orders for the F-35. The program was back on track, with production ramping up to meet demand from multiple nations. The total program value remains at approximately $400 billion over its lifetime, General Hayes continued, making it the largest defense acquisition program in history. The recent technical breakthroughs have secured this investment and strengthened our alliances with partner nations. After the briefing, Colonel Hartford approached Maria in the hallway. He had been promoted since the DAS crisis and was now overseeing multiple advanced fighter programs. "Maria, I wanted you to know that your power management solution is being adapted for other aircraft programs. The new B-21 bomber team has requested your consultation on their power distribution systems. Maria still felt surprised when senior officials treated her as an equal. I'd be happy to help, Colonel. There's something else. The Air Force Academy has invited you to speak at their annual engineering symposium. They want cadets to hear about innovative problem-solving approaches. The idea of speaking to future Air Force officers was both exciting and intimidating. What would I talk about? Your story. How fresh perspectives and diverse experiences can solve problems that have stumped conventional approaches. It's exactly what the next generation of military engineers needs to hear. Back at the Lockheed Martin facility in Fort Worth, Maria's life had changed dramatically. She now had her own office with windows overlooking the flight line where F-35s rolled out for test flights. Her desk was covered with technical journals, system diagrams, and photos of her daughter, Elena. The engineering team that had once barely noticed her now regularly sought her input on complex problems. She had become known throughout the company as someone who could find solutions others missed. Dr. Williams knocked on her door frame. Maria, do you have a few minutes? We have a situation with the power systems on the Navy variant. The F-35C, designed for aircraft carrier operations, faced unique challenges. The stresses of carrier landings and the saltwater environment created different power management requirements than the Air Force and Marine versions. What kind of problems are they seeing? Maria asked, pulling up the technical specifications on her computer. Intermittent power fluctuations during arrested landings. The hook impact and sudden deceleration are causing brief power interruptions in some of the sensor systems. Maria studied the data. This looks similar to the resonance patterns we solved with the DS, but the trigger is different. Instead of G-forces during maneuvers, we're dealing with sudden mechanical shock. Exactly. The Navy is concerned that these power interruptions could affect critical systems during carrier operations. Within an hour, Maria had assembled a team to analyze the carrier landing power issues. She applied the same systematic approach that had solved the DS problem, identifying the root cause, developing predictive solutions, and testing under real-world conditions. The solution involved modifying the power conditioning algorithms to anticipate the mechanical shock of carrier landings and pre-stabilize the power delivery systems. It was elegant in its simplicity and built on the foundation of her earlier work. But Maria's impact extended beyond technical solutions. Her presence had changed the culture in Building 47. Other employees from diverse backgrounds felt more comfortable speaking up with ideas. The engineering teams began actively seeking input from technicians, maintenance staff, and other specialists who had been overlooked before. Jennifer Chen had been promoted to lead systems engineer and was working directly under Maria on several projects. "You've changed how we approach problems," she told Maria during one of their planning meetings. "We look for insights from everywhere now, not just from traditional engineering sources." The broader F-35 program was experiencing its most successful period in years. Production was ahead of schedule, international sales were strong, and the technical issues that had plagued earlier versions were being systematically resolved. General Hayes visited the Fort Worth facility to personally recognize the team's achievements. She met privately with Maria in Colonel Hartford's office. "Ms. Santos, your contribution to this program has been extraordinary. Not just the technical solutions, but the example you've set about recognizing talent wherever it exists." "Thank you, General. I was fortunate to work with an excellent team." "I understand you're originally from Mexico and faced challenges getting your credentials recognized here." Maria nodded. "The process was complicated and expensive. Many qualified immigrants face similar barriers." General Hayes leaned forward. "The Department of Defense is launching an initiative to identify and utilize technical talent from all sources, including immigrants whose qualifications may not be fully recognized. Would you be willing to help develop this program? The opportunity to help other engineers facing the same challenges she had overcome was immediately appealing. I would be honored to contribute. The initiative, called the Technical Talent Recognition Program, aimed to identify qualified professionals working in non-technical roles and provide pathways to utilize their skills. Maria became one of the program's key advisors, helping to develop assessment procedures and mentorship systems. At home, Elena had watched her mother's transformation with amazement and pride. Now 13 years old, she was excelling in advanced mathematics and science courses. "Mom, my teacher says I should enter the state science fair," Elena announced over dinner one evening. "That's wonderful, mija. What's your project idea?" "I want to study power efficiency in small electronic devices. Maybe I can find ways to make phone batteries last longer using some of the principles you work with." Maria smiled. Elena was already thinking like an engineer, seeing everyday problems as technical challenges to solve. "I think that's an excellent project. Would you like me to help you understand some of the underlying mathematics?" "Yes, please. And Mom, when I grow up, I want to be an engineer like you." "You can be any kind of engineer you want to be, Elena. The world needs young people like you to solve the problems we haven't figured out yet." The following month, Maria received an unexpected phone call at work. The caller identified himself as Dr. Roberto Martinez from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico. "Ms. Santos, I wanted to congratulate you on your work with the F-35 program. Your success has been reported in aerospace journals throughout Latin America." Maria was surprised. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez. How can I help you?" "We would like to invite you to speak at our annual engineering conference in Mexico City. Many of our graduates face similar challenges when they emigrate, and your story would be inspiring for students considering international careers." The idea of returning to Mexico as a successful engineer was deeply meaningful. She had left as someone whose qualifications weren't sufficient for the American job market. She would return as a senior engineer who had helped save one of the most important military programs in history. I would be delighted to speak at the conference. The speech in Mexico City was one of the most emotional experiences of Maria's life. Standing before an audience of engineering students and professors at her alma mater, she told the story of her journey from coffee assistant to senior systems engineer. "Your knowledge and abilities don't disappear when you cross a border," she told the students. "They may not be immediately recognized, but they remain part of who you are. Be patient, be persistent, and never stop looking for opportunities to demonstrate what you can do." After her presentation, dozens of students approached her with questions about working in the United States, dealing with credential recognition, and maintaining their technical skills in non-engineering jobs. One young woman named Carmen reminded Maria of herself years earlier. "I have a job offer in Texas, but it's in manufacturing, not engineering. Should I take it?" "Take the job, but don't give up on engineering," Maria advised. "Learn everything you can about the company's technical operations. Listen to the engineers' conversations. When you see problems you can help solve, find the right person to share your insights with." Back in Fort Worth, the F-35 program continued to achieve new milestones. The power management solutions Maria had developed were being integrated into other military aircraft programs. Her team was consulting on projects ranging from drone power systems to space-based platforms. The success of the Technical Talent Recognition Program had led to similar initiatives throughout the defense industry. Hundreds of qualified professionals had been identified and moved into appropriate technical positions. Colonel Hartford, now a full colonel and program director, called Maria into his office for their quarterly review. "Maria, I have some news. The Air Force Research Laboratory has offered you a position as a senior research engineer. You would be working on next-generation aircraft power systems and leading a team of specialists from multiple companies. It was a significant promotion and recognition of her expertise. That's an incredible opportunity. There's more. The position comes with funding to establish a research fellowship program for international engineers working in the United States. You would be helping others follow the path you've created. Maria thought about her journey from serving coffee in Building 47 to potentially leading research that would shape the future of military aviation. It seemed almost impossible that so much had changed in just 2 years. Colonel, when I was pushing that coffee cart down the hallway, did you ever imagine this conversation would happen? Colonel Hartford laughed. Honestly, no. But that's the point, isn't it? Talent exists in places we don't expect to find it. The key is creating systems that recognize and nurture that talent wherever it appears. That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table helping Elena with her science fair project on power efficiency. Elena's approach to the problem was sophisticated and creative, combining principles from multiple engineering disciplines. "You're going to be an excellent engineer," Maria told her daughter. "I learned from the best," Elena replied, smiling. As Maria looked around their home, the same small apartment they had lived in when she was serving coffee, she realized that while their physical circumstances hadn't changed dramatically, everything else had transformed. She was no longer hiding her abilities or accepting that her qualifications didn't matter. Elena would grow up seeing her mother as a successful professional whose ideas were valued and implemented. The example would shape Elena's expectations for her own future. The F-35 Lightning II had become the backbone of American and Allied air power, with over 800 aircraft delivered to military services around the world. The program that had once been criticized for cost overruns and technical problems was now praised as a model of successful international cooperation and technical innovation. Maria's power management solutions had been implemented in every F-35 variant, ensuring reliable operation of critical systems under the most demanding conditions. Pilots flying combat missions in challenging environments depended on the systems she had helped design. But perhaps more importantly, her story had changed how the defense industry thought about talent and expertise. The assumption that valuable insights only came from people with traditional credentials and career paths had been challenged and, in many cases, abandoned. Other companies had begun their own programs to identify hidden talent among their workforce. Janitors with engineering backgrounds, security guards with technical expertise, and administrative staff with specialized knowledge were being recognized and promoted. At the annual Lockheed Martin Awards ceremony, Maria received the company's highest technical achievement award for her contributions to the F-35 program. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of engineers and managers, she thought about all the conversations she had overheard while serving coffee, all the problems she had understood but couldn't voice, all the solutions she had kept to herself. 2 years ago, I was invisible in this company, she said. I had knowledge and experience that could have helped solve critical problems, but I was just the coffee lady. The real achievement here isn't my technical contribution. It's that we learn to see talent wherever it exists and create opportunities for everyone to contribute their best work. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. Later that night, Maria called her parents in Mexico City to share the news about her award. Her father, who had always been proud of her engineering degree, was amazed by her success in America. "Mija, you have honored our family and shown that knowledge has no borders," he said. As Maria prepared for bed, she thought about the F-35 jets that would take off tomorrow morning for training flights, their DAS systems working flawlessly thanks to the algorithms she had developed. She thought about Elena, asleep in the next room, dreaming of her own engineering career. The girl who had once served coffee to engineers was now shaping the future of military aviation and opening doors for others who had been overlooked. She was Maria Santos, aerospace engineer, and she was exactly where she belonged. The $400 billion F-35 program continued its mission of protecting democratic nations around the world. But for Maria, the program's greatest success wasn't measured in dollars or aircraft delivered. It was measured in the knowledge that talent can emerge from anywhere, that expertise can't be hidden forever, and that sometimes the person serving your coffee might just be the one who saves your most important project. Maria Santos had rescued the F-35 Lightning II, but more importantly, she had rescued herself.